I knew the exact moment my career at Vanguard Capital was over, and it was not because anyone had the guts to say it to my face. It was the way the receptionist suddenly found a microscopic smudge on her desk so fascinating that she could not look up to greet me. Before I even set my coffee down, my phone buzzed with an urgent calendar invite for a performance review in 10 minutes. No agenda, no context, just a cold digital summons. Just 3 weeks ago, I had personally closed a deal that guaranteed $30 million in revenue over the next 3 years. I spent 12 straight quarters shattering every performance metric this company threw at me, building massive client accounts from literal back-of-the-napkin ideas. Yet here I was, getting summoned to a sudden ambush like a teenager getting sent to the principal office. When you survive long enough in corporate finance, you learn to spot the vultures before they land. As I walked down the executive hallway, I caught my boss Samantha whispering frantically in her office. She was using that sickening, honey-coated voice she always reserved for laying off junior analysts, pretending to care while slicing off their livelihoods. I noticed several colleagues I had mentored for years suddenly darting into print rooms and supply closets just to avoid eye contact. They knew what was happening, and their cowardice was all the confirmation I needed to prepare my counterattack. Instead of marching straight into the trap, I made a quick detour to my desk and opened the locked lower drawer. I pulled out my original employment agreement, specifically turning to the renegotiated contract terms I had signed 4 quarters ago. There it was, clear as day under Section 9, complete with Samantha and the Chief Executive Officer initials. It was my safety net, my personal insurance policy against corporate greed, and they were about to walk blindly into it. I placed the document securely inside my leather folder, adjusted my jacket, and gave myself a calm smile in the glass wall. Walking into conference room felt like walking into an execution chamber where the executioners did not realize the power was out. Samantha was sitting there flanked by 2 human resources representatives who looked like they were chewing on glass. There were no laptops open, no quarterly reports, and no genuine discussion waiting for me on that table. Samantha put on her best fake sympathetic face and told me that due to sudden corporate restructuring, my role was being eliminated effective immediately. She claimed the decision came directly from senior leadership, meaning our arrogant chief executive who could not even be bothered to show up himself. She asked for my security badge with a gentle sigh, clearly expecting me to cry, scream, or beg for a severance package. Instead, I simply handed it over with a polite smile. What Samantha and the rest of corporate leadership failed to realize was the catastrophic flaw in their little cost-cutting scheme. They thought firing me 24 hours before my annual equity bonus vested would save the firm millions of dollars. Instead, my contract contained an aggressive acceleration clause that triggered the moment I was terminated without cause right before a vesting date. By trying to rob me of my bonus, they had actually doubled what they legally owed me. I walked out of that conference room looking like a person headed to a relaxing lunch rather than someone who had just lost their job. I bypassed the main elevators that led down to the parking garage and took the executive lift straight up to the legal and compliance floor. I dropped my leather folder onto the desk of Justin, a brilliant young in-house attorney I had helped mentor through his early years at the firm. When Justin looked through the document, his calm composure completely shattered as he realized the magnitude of what the executive team had done. He pointed out that Section 9 was totally airtight and that firing me within a 24-hour window of my vesting date triggered immediate liquidation, liquidated damages, and total coverage of legal costs. Samantha and the chief executive had tried to save $4 million, but their impatience had just created an $8 million liability. I asked Justin to discreetly escalate the contract to the senior board counsel, ensuring the panic spread quietly from the inside out. Leaving his office, I made one final stop to hand a duplicate file to Sarah, a trusted paralegal who knew where every corporate document was hidden. She almost choked on her coffee when she saw the timestamps and the signatures, realizing that the executive team had signed their own financial death warrant without reading the fine print. Within an hour, I was sitting across the street at a quiet cafe, sipping an espresso while watching the absolute chaos unfold through my phone. An urgent email hit my inbox from the chief board counsel, acknowledging receipt of Section 9 and requesting an immediate conversation regarding an out-of-court settlement. Down the block, I could practically hear the screams as Samantha and the chief executive realized the catastrophic mistake they had made. By trying to discard me the moment they thought my value had peaked, they ended up triggering the most expensive mistake in the firm history. They attempted to play a game of corporate chess, completely forgetting that I was the one who wrote the rules in the first place. As I closed my laptop and stepped out into the afternoon sun, I knew my time there was over, but the victory was entirely mine. The email from Chief Board Counsel was only the opening move. Over the next 48 hours, the quiet panic inside Vanguard Capital erupted into full-scale emergency board meetings. My legal counsel filed a formal demand for immediate payment under Section 9, attaching every timestamped signature, implementation memo, and digital audit trail. The board members realized that contesting the clause in public arbitration would not only guarantee a loss, but it would also expose their shady termination tactics to major shareholders and regulators. Samantha tried to shift the blame onto human resources, claiming she was never properly briefed on the specific terms of my renegotiated contract. However, the metadata on the original files told a completely different story, proving she had personally reviewed and approved the exact language for quarters prior. With the chief executive facing immense pressure from the board for allowing an $8 million oversight on his watch, the firm realized their only viable option was to surrender quietly before the news leaked to the press. On Friday afternoon, my attorney received a signed settlement agreement covering the full accelerated payout, complete base salary multiplier, and extended health benefits, without a single counteroffer. They quietly transferred the entire sum into my account, desperate to scrub my name from their records and put an end to the nightmare. The very people who thought they could casually toss me out of the building were forced to cut the largest individual severance check in the history of the company. I walked away from Vanguard Capital not with anger or regret, but with total financial freedom and my professional reputation completely intact. 3 months later, I launched my own private consultancy firm, taking several of my primary clients with me, including the Hastings account I had built from scratch. Looking back at that morning in conference room 4, I realized that standing your ground and knowing your worth is the ultimate advantage, because when you play the long game, corporate bullies always end up paying for their own trap. 6 months after the payout hit my bank account, I was sitting in the corner booth of a quiet downtown restaurant, enjoying a lunch that had nothing to do with corporate budgets or quarterly forecasts. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Justin, the in-house attorney who had helped me navigate the initial fallout. He sent a link to a major financial news outlet with a brief message. Thought you might appreciate the update. I clicked the link and scanned the headline. Vanguard Capital had just announced a massive executive shakeup, citing poor risk management and strategic missteps. The board had officially ousted the chief executive, and Samantha's department had been completely dismantled, her position eliminated in a late-night corporate restructuring. The exact same cold, corporate euphemisms they had used on me were now printed in black and white next to their own names. In the months following my departure, my new consultancy firm had flourished faster than I ever anticipated. Clients who had trusted me for years saw right through the polished PR statements Vanguard tried to put out. When the Hastings Group learned I was working independently, they transferred their entire portfolio to my firm within a week, bringing that $30 million trajectory right along with them. It turned out people preferred doing business with the person who actually did the work rather than the executives sitting in corner offices taking credit for it. Looking back, the hardest part was not the betrayal itself, but the initial shock of realizing how disposable loyalty can be in a high-stakes environment. But holding every single card and knowing when to play them transformed what should have been a devastating blow into the single best career move of my life. I put my phone back in my purse, took a sip of my drink and smiled. They took away my title, but in the end, they funded my empire.